Welcome! Enjoy some of these titles from our Hot Summer Reads program. And now for some historical fiction titles.
It's been 17 years since Kathryn Stockett wrote The Help. This is her highly anticipated second novel, The Calamity Club. Set in Oxford, Mississippi, it's 1933. The novel follows an unlikely trio of women fighting for survival as the Great Depression looms. Societal expectations strip away these women's choices, and the story is told through the lens of three characters. Meg LaFleur is a sharp 11-year-old girl. Abandoned by her mother, she resides at the Lafayette County Orphan Asylum. Bertie Calhoun is a 24-year-old unmarried bookkeeper. She arrives in Oxford to beg her wealthy sister for money. And Charlie, a determined woman with a checkered past and very little left to lose. When their paths cross, Charlie devises a scandalous plan to save them. They converted a state into the Calamity Club. Just like The Help, the core of the novel is a scrappy sisterhood of marginalized women who step up to protect one another. It's great for book clubs, but it's a beast of a book, 650 pages. This new one from Stockett is storytelling at its finest.
Maggie O'Farrell, author of Hamnet and The Marriage Portrait, is back with a descriptive and sweeping story of familial and geographical history that will transport readers to 1860s Ireland. This novel follows Tomas and his son Liam as they work for the Great Ordnance Survey Project to map the whole of Ireland. The task is not easy, however, since it's 1865 and the country was only recently ravaged by the Great Hunger, making Tomas's maps a record of the disaster. British soldiers overseeing the project are expecting the work done and are due to arrive any day. However, Tomas is derailed from his progress by an unsettling encounter that will change not only his life, but his family's as well. Liam, who is only 10 years old, is now face to face with a man operating very differently from the father he knew, and he's now having to think through how he is going to finish the mapping and get them both home. For readers who love a strong sense of place, where the location is a character in and of itself, you will love the ancient woodlands and atmospheric details of Ireland in this one. An excellent read for fans of O'Farrell and those that love lyrical writing and poignant characters.
A Fortune of Sand is the adult fiction debut by young adult best-selling author Ruta Sepetys. It's 1927 in Detroit during the height of the Prohibition era. The story follows Marjorie Lennox, the creative and rebellious youngest daughter of a powerful automotive tycoon family. Marjorie longs to escape her family and secretly applies and is accepted into an elite exclusive arts residency. She quickly discovers a sinister undercurrent that permeates this grand estate. The program she's in features disturbingly strict rules, doors that lock at bizarre hours, and unsettling noises. Dark rumors ripple through the estate regarding young women who have suddenly gone missing. The handsome benefactor behind the residency, he pulls Marjorie into a dangerous psychological web. This is set against the backdrop of speakeasies, rum runners, and secret gangs, and the book highlights how wealth often hides dark, systemic rot. Sepetys drew from meticulously researching Detroit, the 1920s automotive dynasties, historic Ford estates, and the real-life Eloise Asylum. The book is being dubbed The Great Gatsby meets the Royal Tenenbaums, mixed with the suspense of an Agatha Christie novel.
And now for our first of several nonfiction interludes.
Imagine a time when the highway was just a muddy cowpath, GPS was a series of confusing hand-drawn maps, and the automobile was still nothing more than a rich man's toy. In 1909, America was a country of disconnected islands. Then Henry Ford decided to prove his Model T wasn't just a car, it was the future. Eric Moskowitz's The Hardest, Longest Race, Henry Ford and the Cross-Country Contest That Changed America, tells the pulse-pounding story of the Great Transcontinental Race, an event that didn't just test engines, it built the modern world. The premise was simple: drive from New York City to Seattle. The reality was a nightmare. Moskowitz brings to life a cast of characters that feel like they stepped out of a Western. You have Henry Ford, desperate to prove his everyman car could outlast the luxury models, and the drivers who faced blizzards in the Rockies and quicksand in the Midwest. But this wasn't just for a trophy. The winner would determine whether we became a nation of trains or a nation of drivers. If you like history that reads like an adventure novel, this is your book. You'll feel the vibration of the steering column and the spray of the mud, but more importantly, you'll see the birth of the American road trip. You'll understand the immense physical labor it took to pave the way across the continent. The Hardest, Longest Race is a cinematic, high-octane look at the moment the American frontier was finally conquered. Not by the horse, but by the piston. Buckle up for a journey into the past that explains exactly how we got to the present. We've all heard of the Bletchley Park codebreakers who helped defeat the Nazis. We've even started to learn the names of the hidden figures behind the space race. But what if I told you that in the shadow of the Cold War, a group of black women were our primary line of defense against a Soviet nuclear threat? In Decoding the Devil, Black Women Codebreakers, and the Secret War Against Stalin's Bomb, Sarah Valentine unearths a mystery that was buried for decades, not just by government secrecy, but by the systemic erasure of the women who quite literally saved the world from Stalin's bomb. The book takes us inside the top secret halls of Arlington Hall, where an elite group of Black mathematicians and linguists were tasked with the impossible, breaking the Soviet Venona codes. But Valentine doesn't just write about the math. She writes about the duality of their lives. These women were uncovering Soviet spies at the highest level of government, yet they were returning home to a segregated D.C. where they couldn't even sit at the same lunch counters as their white colleagues. Valentine calls the Soviet threat the devil, but she also explores the other devils these women fought. Intrusive FBI surveillance, the Red Scare, and the constant pressure to be twice as good just to stay in the room. Decoding the Devil balances a tense geopolitical thriller with a deeply personal social history. It's a book about intellectual brilliance thriving under the weight of oppression. If you want to understand the true cost of security and the unsung geniuses who paid that price in silence, you have to read this book. It is a masterful tribute to the women who decoded the future while the world tried to keep them in the past. We like to think of American fascism as a modern glitch, something imported from 20th century Europe or a byproduct of the social media age. But in Joseph Kelly's The Biggest Lie, The Prehistory of Fascism, 1818 to 1915, he argues that the roots of American authoritarianism weren't planted recently. They were sown at the very beginning, hidden in plain sight within the myths that we tell ourselves about the founding of this nation. Kelly takes us back to the 17th and 18th centuries, long before the word fascism even existed. He argues that the DNA of the movement can be found in the early American colonies, in the myth of a God-given right to the land, the cult of the strongman leader, and the fundamental contradiction of a nation built on liberty while relying on systemic enslavement. This isn't a book about political parties, though. It's a deep dive into intellectual history. Kelly tracks how these early ideas provided the scaffolding for modern anti-democratic movements. If you're a fan of the 1619 Project or the work of Timothy Snyder, this book is essential. Kelly is a rigorous historian, but he writes with the urgency of a whistleblower. He challenges the big lie that fascism is un-American, showing instead how it is a recurring shadow in our history, one that grows whenever we fail to confront our past honestly. The Biggest Lie is a haunting look in the mirror. It asks us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the American character and warns us that the greatest threat to democracy isn't a foreign invader, but the unresolved ghosts of our own history. Read it to understand where we've been, so that we can finally decide where we're going.
And now for some science fiction, fantasy, and horror. This debut sci-fi novel from Isabel Kim delves into doppelgangers, or instances, and will instantly immerse readers in its complex characters and intriguing storyline. This is perfect for fans of Severance. However, don't be fooled into thinking this is merely a copycat of the show, because this debut, while new, is based on a 2021 short story Kim wrote that really analyzes this idea of a person divided. This book explores the idea that when one immigrates, they leave a copy of themselves behind called an instance. One person enters the new country while the other stays trapped at home. Some instances choose to stay in touch in hopes of one day reintegrating to again live life as one person. Others, like some of the main characters in this story, choose to not speak to their instances, finding themselves divided not only in body but in their desires. While there has a much stronger sci-fi feel with this tech and corporate programming elements of this one, it also made me think of the Midnight Library for how it digs into one's personal choices and which life they want to choose for themselves. Overall, an absorbing read delving into the deeper mental state of immigration and what feeling torn between two selves looks like when it manifests tangibly to the outside world.
The Children by Melissa Albert is an adult debut Gothic fantasy novel. Gwen Sharp has two childhoods. The idyllic one fans of her mother, legendary author Edith Sharp, believe she had, and the real one, a near feral, neglected existence in an isolated Vermont farmhouse. You see, Gwen and her brother Ennis were the subjects of their mother's famous Ninth City books, which blended magic with their actual lives. But then their farmhouse burned down, her parents were killed, the book series left unfinished, and the siblings became estranged. But as an adult, Gwen is forced to confront her past as her brother announces a new art installation that is titled Mother. The art is disturbing and rumors are swirling. Gwen must examine the dark, dangerous reality behind their mother's fantasy world and the Night of the Fire. The writing is atmospheric, poison apple, dark fairy tale type. And they're saying this reads like Stephen King's storytelling style. The Children is ideal for readers who enjoy slow burn mysteries with lush descriptive prose and damaged, morally gray characters.
Katherine Arden is a must-read author for me, as she writes the most engaging and atmospheric historical fantasies. In The Unicorn Hunters, Arden reimagines the life of Anne of Brittany and her real struggle to maintain Brittany's independence while being forced into a marriage that will not serve her or the realm. History merges with fantasy, however, as Anne seeks to delay her impending marriage and hide her plans to secretly betroth herself to France's greatest enemy by taking her royal court into a magical forest under the guise of hunting unicorns. But soon, the appearance of a unicorn and a stranger out of legend plunges Anne into a world of enchantment where she will either find the power to change her destiny or be lost in the shadows forever. This book tells a fabulous alternative history with elements of Breton folklore. Arden weaves the detail and groundedness of historical fiction with the otherworldliness of fantasy, and she does it so seamlessly. This is a book where I would highly recommend the audio too, because it draws readers in and truly makes the book come alive. And now for a look at some new and upcoming horror releases. First, we have The Girl with a Thousand Faces by Sunyi Dean. This fantasy horror/gothic tale is set in historic Hong Kong, merging local legends with ancient myths to create a haunting story of ghosts, grief, and unforgiving women. I'm so excited to dive into this one. This atmospheric read is getting tons of praise for Dean's beautiful writing and amazing world building. This one is a great blend of spooky and thought-provoking. Next, we have Headlights. In this high-intensity read from best-selling author C.J. Leede, readers will follow a hunt across the frozen wilderness of Colorado. Before Special Agent Daniel Stansfield leaves the FBI, he's called back to Denver, where old crimes seem to be repeating themselves, and Daniel must face what's been hunting him all along. This one certainly fits with its horror genre, as it's filled with death, gore, and all kinds of dark undertones. Last, we have Fabulous Bodies from the best-selling author of Bury Your Gaze, Chuck Tingle. This supernatural joyride about a fashion influencer by day and grave robber by night, Poppy, is getting tons of buzz. When rock star and queer icon Eddie Michaels dies, Poppy goes to pick up his body from the medical examiner's office. But what starts as a routine delivery quickly goes off course when Eddie wakes up and Poppy must fight for her life. Filled with dark humor and a bloody night of entertainment across Palm Springs, Chuck Tingle and horror fans will love this latest release. Now for some more nonfiction titles.
We've all heard the phrase essential worker. During the pandemic, we clapped for them, we called them heroes, and we put signs in our yards to say thanks. But once the crisis faded, did we actually change how we treat the people who keep our society running? In Cleanup on Aisle 5, Essential Work, Poverty Wages, and the View from Behind the Supermarket Register, Anne Larson takes us behind the sliding glass doors of the American supermarket. This isn't a retail management guide, though. It's a searing, first-person account of what it's like to be labeled essential while being paid expendable wages. Larson lived this. She spent years behind the register, and she uses that vantage point to expose the invisible struggles of the working poor. She describes the physical toll of 10-hour shifts on concrete floors, the verbal abuse hidden behind a customer is always right culture, and the scheduling that makes it impossible to plan a life. She connects the checkout lane to the global boardroom, showing how our obsession with low prices has created a permanent underclass. She challenges us to look at our grocery receipts not just as a total, but as a document of who was sacrificed to get those items on the shelf. Ultimately, Cleanup on Aisle 5 is a call to look our neighbors in the eye. Larson doesn't want applause, she wants awareness. If you want to understand the heartbeat of the modern working class, you need to read this book. It is provocative, deeply human, and I guarantee you'll never walk into a grocery store the same way again. I sure haven't. In 1962, John Steinbeck took a poodle named Charlie across the country to find the real America. In 2026, Lauren Huff, an Air Force veteran and former cult member, did the same thing. But instead of a poodle, she had a husky mix named Woody, and instead of a pristine truck, she had a ramshackle 2001 Dodge van she fixed up herself. Monster of a Land, On the Road in Search of Modern America, is the follow-up to Huff's bestseller, Leaving Isn't the Hardest Thing. It's part travelogue and part blistering social commentary, delivered in her signature voice, sharp, funny, and empathetic. The book follows her journey from Austin, Texas, across a country that feels more divided than ever. She stops at the gas stations and dive bars most authors overlook, documenting the lives of the marginalized, with the perspective of someone who has actually lived that life. She explores the other America and the ghosts of the trips she could never afford to take back when she was working as a bartender or a cable guy. Huff has a BS detector like no other. She uses Woody as a social lubricant to bridge gaps with people of every political stripe, finding beauty in the monster of the land without ever ignoring its teeth. If you want a story that is as vulnerable as it is hilarious, Monster of a Land is a must-read. It's a reminder that while the country is vast and terrifying, the people in it are far more complex than a news cycle suggests. It's about what happens when you finally just get in the dang car. Get ready to hit the road with Lauren and Woody. Just don't expect a smooth ride. Expect the truth.
Now for some mystery and thriller reads.
Natalie Borelli's The Housewife is a dark, twisty domestic thriller. Jody is a woman with a troubled past and a recent prison sentence. She achieves her lifelong dream of becoming the perfect housewife with Dr. Roy Davies, a famous and wealthy psychologist. Upon moving into Roy's Beverly Hills home, Jody finds herself living in the shadow of his first wife, Deborah, who died by suicide only 6 months earlier. Jody is seen as an unwelcome gold digger by friends and family. Jody learns that Deborah had become a recluse before her death, and she begins to suspect Roy was responsible for his first wife's demise, and she starts her own investigation. Jody, she wants to go to the police, but she's terrified that doing so will expose her own dark secrets, specifically her criminal past. Jody must uncover the truth about Roy before she becomes the next perfect wife to vanish. This book is a strong read-alike for fans of Frida McFadden who enjoy fast-paced page-turners with unhinged female leads.
I Know the Ants by Lang Leave. I like to call this one a breadcrumb mystery with its very strategic scattering of clues that build over the course of the story. I found myself unable to put it down because I had to know where the clues were leading. This mystery thriller also reads like literary fiction and how the author explores the complexities of characters, with readers figuring out through the story who these protagonists really are and what they are truly motivated by. This story follows May, a young woman who is struggling to find her footing in life. She is further unmoored when her childhood best friend Zoe publishes a memoir about their childhood friend group, the Daisy Chain, and the tragic events of her sister's murder and her own brain injury that caused her to lose her memories of the prior year. With Zoe's memoir coming out, she shares how she started remembering more from this lost year, kicking off a series of events that are chaotic, tragic, and illuminating as the old friends reconnect to find new answers. Leave writes with lyrical imagery about cycles of trauma, abuse, and family in a way that is challenging and well done. The characters in this read are fascinating. There are true villains, morally gray characters that keep you guessing, and those you feel deeply for. I found myself so curious to piece together this mystery, filled with fractured memories. Also, buckle up for the ending. That's all I'll say. I will mention too, definitely check the content warnings on this one because there is a lot of dark elements throughout this story. It made me think of The Good Girl's Guide to Murder and Pretty Little Liars, but more adult, in its elements of girlhood turned tragic. But this also has a deeper narrative of familial expectations and what it's like being immigrants in a country when times are tough. A very interesting and multifaceted read.
Big Little Truths by Liane Moriarty is the much anticipated sequel to Big Little Lies. This one is set 10 years later. The last time we saw the women of Big Little Lies, their children were 5 years old. If someone wasn't invited to a birthday party, oh, feelings were hurt. 10 years later, and these kids are now in high school, navigating all the drama that comes with the teen years. But when the high school principal receives a threatening package in the mail, word quickly spreads throughout the community, and the parents, oh, they are in an uproar. But our 5 main characters have, other things to worry about: their marriages, a mother-in-law, life crises, and turning 50. When a stranger begins lurking around the school asking supposedly innocent questions, this tightly connected group of women must finally face the repercussions of the big little truths that they have and have not shared with their kids. Because you see, the stakes are now much higher than not being invited to an ice skating party, and the ice, well, it's never been thinner for any of them. This book has been described as deliciously addictive, and it's expected to serve as the basis for the 3rd season of the HBO series.
Now for some more nonfiction titles.
When we talk about the new Cold War, we usually think of the great halls of power in Washington, Beijing, or Moscow. But according to veteran foreign correspondent Hannah Lucinda Smith, the real battle for the future isn't happening at the centers of power. It's happening in the hinterlands, the new Cold War brewing at the peripheries of the West. In her gripping new book, Smith takes us to the forgotten edges of the map, the places where Western influence is fading and where a new, more authoritarian world order is quietly moving in. Smith spent years reporting from places like Turkey, the Balkans, and the Russian steppe. She introduces us to people living in gray zones, like Narva on the Estonian border. These are communities that feel abandoned by a distant West and are now being courted by strongman politics. What's so fascinating is how Smith identifies the tools of this expansion. It's not just about tanks. It's about infrastructure, digital disinformation, and the slow erosion of democratic norms. She shows how the vacuum left by Western retreat is being filled by a hybrid of Russian ambition and Chinese investment. Hinterlands is more than a geopolitical lecture. It's a human story that captures the anxiety of people wondering which way their country will lean by nightfall. It is a wake-up call that challenges the assumption that the Western way of life is inevitable. If you want to understand the cracks in the global order before they become craters, you need to read this book. It is a vivid, haunting look at the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Have you ever been at a beautiful sunset, or even just a particularly aesthetic brunch with your friends, and felt that tiny, nagging pressure to capture it? Not just as a memory, though, but for the grid? Katherine Jeser Morton, the writer who famously decoded the millennial mom aesthetic, has written the definitive guide to why we do this. The story of your life, how social media shapes the way we experience everything, isn't just about apps. It's about how we've started living as if we're the protagonists in a movie that never stops filming. Jezzer Morton moves past the basic social media's bad trope. Instead, she explores how the logic of platforms like Instagram and TikTok has seeped into our actual psychology. She breaks down the aesthetic burden, the invisible labor of making our homes and vacations look right, and how likes have become the new metrics for whether a life event was actually successful. She looks at everything from main character energy to the way we've turned our private domestic lives into public facing content. If you've ever felt doom scroll guilt or wondered why your kitchen suddenly feels inadequate because it doesn't look like a Pinterest board, this book is your therapy. Jezzer Morton is witty, sharp, and observant. She doesn't judge. She's right there in the trenches with us, explaining the life as content phenomenon with the humor of a friend. The story of your life is a mirror held up to the digital age. It's a necessary read for anyone who wants to reclaim their uncontentified life. It will change the way you look at your phone and your living room forever. So put down the phone. Rediscover what it feels like to live a life that no one is watching.
For some great summer reads, we have some romance titles for you all. Phoebe Berman's Gonna Lose It by Brooke Averick. This relatable and fun contemporary romance is a debut from Brooke Averick, who is a comedian and host of the Brooke and Connor Makeup Podcast. You can tell Averick takes her candid and humorous podcast style, as well as her willingness to delve into mental health, into her writing, as our heartwarming main character Phoebe struggles with severe dating anxiety, despite being a die-hard hopeless romantic. Phoebe Berman is about to turn 30, and her biggest fear, apart from dating itself, is being a 30-year-old virgin. So with 1 month until her looming birthday, Phoebe's determined to utilize all her type A tools like list making and planning to overcome her crippling anxiety and finally achieve her goal. With her checklist in hand and her supportive friend group at her side, Phoebe finds her once non-existent dating life to be suddenly piping hot as she juggles 3 romantic prospects at once. A fun element of this read is it takes the expected happily ever after that you know to expect with romance and gives readers an enjoyable surprise in not knowing who the happily ever after guy will end up being. Will it be the gorgeous new 4th grade teacher at her school, a former high school classmate that she's been keeping in touch with, or will it be her roommate, the ever-present best friends to lovers situation of her dreams? This book feels like a classic 90s rom-com and is a great summer read to enjoy for all its relatable moments and coming-of-age heart.
Meet Me in Paris by Kristin Harmel is a contemporary novel. Unlike Harmel's typical historical fiction, this book is set in present day, and it's been described as Love Actually meets The Notebook. The narrative follows 9 Americans over the course of one life-changing week in the City of Light. Their lives intersect as they each navigate themes of love, loss, and redemption. We meet Julia, who takes her 23-year-old daughter Piper on a first and final trip to Paris because Julia is dying. Piper finds a connection with a French waiter, while Julia meets a man and struggles to share her diagnoses. Elderly songwriter Henry travels to France after learning that Celeste, the woman he loved during World War II and believed was dead, is alive but suffering from dementia. He hopes his songs can reach her through the haze of her memory loss. Jackson is a former star launching a reunion tour in Paris. He searches for a life not defined solely by his past fame and meets a woman who truly understands him. Henry's granddaughter Melody discovers her husband is having an affair. She must decide whether to forgive him or pursue a new life of independence. The setting is atmospheric and romantic. You see, Paris, the city, acts as a character itself. This is a book that explores love in all of its form: first love, maternal love, and self-love.
And there were too many romance titles coming out to name only a few, so we have a very quick look at a couple hot titles coming out. We have The Shippers by Catherine Senner, which is filled with pop psychology, a destination wedding on a cruise ship, and a childhood best friend turned wingman. It includes her classic, witty banter, and heartfelt family storylines. It's a great contemporary romance for summer. Then we have Seek the Traitor's Son by Veronica Roth. This is the author of the Divergent series, and this book is romantasy meets dystopian, and it's getting lots of buzz. Then Carly Fortune is back with Our Perfect Storm, a contemporary romance that fans are already raving about. And then we have The Summer Girlfriend by Christina Forrest. It is a contemporary romance that kicks off her new Heart Beach series. It is a fake dating trope set in a fictional New Jersey beach town with themes of Black generational wealth, family legacy, and self-discovery. Next, we have Rumors and Whiskey, which is romantic suspense, which seems to be an increasingly popular subgenre of romance. Then we have Leave and Come Back, which is a contemporary rom-com meets family drama that is coming out. We have The Open Era, which is a sports romance, which remains a very popular subgenre of romance. And this one's a queer sports romance. Then we have A Prince Among Pirates, a romantasy with a more historical leaning and great queer representation. Next, we have The Missed Connection by Tia Williams. I love Tia Williams' book 7 Days in June, and this one is looking like it will be just as emotionally deep and steamy as that one was. And then we have The Romance Revival by Christina Lauren. The library just had the pleasure of hosting this writing duo at a recent author event, and we are excited for this July contemporary romance release. And now back to some nonfiction titles.
Imagine being convicted of a murder you didn't commit, based on a confession you don't even remember giving, in a town where the police have already decided you're the devil. This isn't a thriller novel, though. It's the chilling reality of Pamela Koloff's Catch the Devil, a true story of murder, deception, and injustice on the Gulf Coast. Set against the humid, salt-stained backdrop of the Mississippi Gulf Coast, the book dives into the 1990 murder of a young woman and the trial of Joe Hebert. Koloff, a legendary investigative journalist, doesn't just recount a crime, she dissects a disaster. She exposes a perfect storm of coerced confessions, tunnel vision, and a legal system much more interested in closing a case than finding the truth. If you loved Killers of the Flower Moon or Just Mercy, this is your next obsession. Koloff's writing is evocative and haunting. She treats the victims with immense dignity while relentlessly hunting the people who let the real killer walk free for decades. It's a story about the fragility of memory and the terrifying power of the state. By the time you finish, you'll be left wondering, if this could happen to Joe Hebert, how safe are any of us? Catching the Devil is a masterclass in true crime. It is infuriating, heart-wrenching, and impossible to put down. It's a plea for justice in a system that often forgets what that word means. We've all seen them. The hawk perched on a skyscraper, the coyote trotting down a suburban street at 3 a.m., or the raccoon that is just a little too good at opening critter-proof locks. We used to think of cities as concrete jungles where nature goes to die. But in Dan Werb's Our Wild Familiars, How Animals Are Adapting to Cities and Reshaping the Natural World, he argues that cities are actually the newest, fastest evolving ecosystems on the planet. And the animals living in them are becoming something entirely new. Dan Werb takes us on a fascinating tour of urban evolution. This isn't just about animals surviving in the city, it's about how the city is literally changing their biology and behavior. He explores the big city brain, explaining why urban crows and squirrels often show higher problem-solving intelligence than their rural cousins. He looks at genetic divergence in city parks and explains why some bird species are stopping their migrations altogether to become permanent urban residents. The book moves from the alleys of Toronto to the rooftops of Berlin, showing that we aren't just sharing space with these animals, we are co-evolving with them. If you love nature documentaries but wish they focused more on your own backyard, this is the book for you. Werb writes with a mix of scientific rigor and narrative charm, challenging the idea that nature is something that only exists out there in the wilderness. Our Wild Familiars is a mind-shifting read. It transforms your daily commute into a safari and makes you look at every pigeon and opossum with newfound respect. It's a beautiful reminder that the wild is a lot closer than we think. What does it mean to finally arrive in a country, only to realize you're still searching for home? Many of us know Reina Grande from her memoir, The Distance Between Us, but her latest collection, Migrant Heart, Essays About Things I Can't Forget, explores a different kind of frontier. It's about the border that exists within the soul of someone who has achieved the American dream, yet still feels the phantom pains of the life they've left behind. In these essays, Grande moves beyond the survival narrative to look at the aftermath. She writes with raw honesty about the complexities of social mobility, the imposter syndrome of entering elite spaces, the tension of raising children in privilege, and the quiet guilt of being the one who made it. She calls this the migrant heart, a heart forever split between two languages and two versions of the self. She tackles the parts of the immigrant experience we don't always talk about, the trauma that doesn't just vanish with citizenship, and the struggle to claim a place in a world that wants to put you in a box. Migrant Heart doesn't offer easy answers. It offers a mirror. It's a call for the kind of empathy that recognizes the courage it takes to rebuild a life over and over again. Whether you have roots elsewhere or have lived in the same town your whole life, these essays will make you rethink what it truly means to belong.
And now some literary and contemporary fiction titles.
The Wish by Heather Morris is a contemporary fiction novel, marking a departure from her typical historical fiction, like The Tattooist of Auschwitz. In The Wish, we meet 15-year-old Jessie, who is facing terminal leukemia after a relapse, and Alex, a 29-year-old reclusive virtual reality games designer. Jessie has been granted a wish, and she requests a digital, 3D interactive recreation of her life's memories, intended as a legacy for her friends and family. Alex is tasked with creating this digital experience, and initially he's reluctant, but slowly he's drawn into Jessie's world and forms a profound friendship that changes him. The narrative explores the devastating impact of cancer on a family, Jessie's parents' strained marriage, and the emotional toll on her younger brother. This read is for fans of Jojo Moyes, Jodi Picoult, and John Green. It is emotional, heartbreaking, uplifting, and reflective, dealing directly with terminal pediatric cancer. This book highlights hope in the darkest of places and is a testament to the power of human connection.
Coco. From the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Less, Andrew Sean Greer, comes this most anticipated book of the year, according to People, Time, and Oprah. Villa Coco is a coming-of-age novel filled with vibrant and chaotic characters that tell this story with humor and heart. After an uneventful undergraduate career, an aspiring archivist, mostly referred to as our young man throughout the novel, takes up residence at a crumbling villa in the Tuscan hills. Here, he becomes an assistant to the Baronessa, known to her friends as Coco, a defiantly youthful and charismatic woman of 92 who keeps everyone around her on their toes. While in Italy, he falls into a complicated relationship with a married man, does his best to catalog Coco's collection of valuables, and becomes an accomplice of sorts in Coco's grand plan for the rest of her life. This book was a delight to read, and I will mention it was so much fun to listen to, as the characters and their humor in particular really comes alive in the audiobook. A perfect read for those wanting to transport themselves to Italy and get folded into the chaos and magic of these characters who become like family and teach readers not to take themselves too seriously. Such an enjoyable read.
The Burning Side by Sarah Damoff is a literary family saga. I loved Damoff's first book, The Bright Years, and knew I'd want to read this one as well. The night Leo tells his wife April that he wants a divorce, their family home is destroyed by a kitchen fire. Having narrowly escaped with their two young children, the couple moves in with April's parents in her childhood home. As they attempt to navigate the logistics of their loss, long-held family secrets and personal histories emerge. The story is told through the alternating points of view of April, who is struggling with motherhood and self-blame, Leo, who is haunted by his childhood of abandonment, and Deb, April's mother, who is privately managing her husband's Alzheimer's diagnoses. This book appeals for fans of character-driven family dramas like the TV show This Is Us, or authors who explore raw, emotional human vulnerability. The book explores aging, dementia, postpartum struggles, childhood trauma, and the cost of long-term commitment. Damoff's writing, it's real, stuff that happens and how people deal with the things life throws their way.
Etna by Paul Yoon. This is an unforgettable story of an ex-military dog, Etna, who after surviving a devastating war, leaves behind his comrades to begin a journey back to the place he knew before the war, in the hopes that it will still be a home for him. This fabulous literary fiction read is set in a fictional country in the present day, and is told through the eyes of a dog in a very convincing and insightful way. Etna traverses ruined landscapes and fights to survive in a peacetime world that proves to be just as precarious. Readers will follow Etna as he encounters other humans and animals who are all attempting to figure out how to begin anew. A book about home, loss, and beginning to trust each other again. Etna centers around the idea of finding hope in the most dire of times. As Publishers Weekly said in their starred review for this title, the author has outdone himself.
Cool House is the adult debut novel from Mary H.K. Choi, known for her best-selling young adult novels. This contemporary drama explores the volatile, deeply bonded, and often toxic relationship between a mother and a daughter in Hollywood. The story follows Moon, or Delilah, an out-of-work actress and recovering addict, and her daughter Stevie. They're financially struggling after the death of Moon's lover and former TV husband, and the two forced to move into their glass-walled pool house in their own backyard so they can rent out the main house to pay their bills. But when Adam, Moon's former TV son and Stevie's lifelong crush, arrives for the funeral, suddenly the dynamic shifts. This trio moves back into the big house, play acting as a picture-perfect family, while old secrets and new tensions threaten to pull them apart. The book explores themes of grief, the performative nature of fame, and the complexity of Asian American identity. Readers should be aware of graphic themes, including alcoholism, drug abuse, eating disorders, and suicide. Librarians have compared this book to a modern Hollywood set, Grey Gardens.
From the author of The Collected Regrets of Clover, which was a big hit among many of our book clubs, comes this new title about aging, friendship, and finding out how to expand beyond the limits we place on ourselves. Good Joy, Bad Joy follows Joy, a devoted wife and mother who for over 80 years has been committed to following the rules in life. Her world is upended, however, when she finds out her free-spirited best friend Hazel has only months to live. Joy's submissiveness is now put under a microscope as Hazel reflects on her own peace in living a full life, and Joy finds she's discontent when analyzing her own. Inspired by her friend's dwindling days, Joy sets herself on a path to live boldly and prove to Hazel and herself that she can step outside her comfort zone and maybe even get herself into a little bit of trouble. As Joy's rule-breaking escalates into committing petty crime, she has to figure out what kind of legacy she wants to leave behind. How can she embrace the liberation that Bad Joy offers while still holding the care and heart held by Good Joy? This is a sweet, thoughtful, and reflective book that makes for great discussion on friendship, family, and legacy. For helpers and the ones who think the only way to make others' lives easier is by being good, this book will encourage and uplift while also maybe sparking some inspiration to live a more unruly life. And be sure to check out these buzzy fiction titles from some big-name authors. There's something for every type of reader in this mix of new releases.
Check out these new nonfiction titles that people are talking about. You'll be sure to find something new and fun to read.
Thanks so much for tuning in to all of the new and upcoming hot summer reads, and happy reading!